Today we will learn about complex sentences, but before this I'd like to review. The first type of sentence that we learned about was a simple sentence. We refer to those as independent clauses or ICs. Here is what a simple sentence is. Many poems use rhyme and meter. In this simple sentence I have a subject, many poems, and a verb, use. However, if I just had my subject and my verb here, this sentence could not stand alone. Many poems use. Well, what do they use? So I have to add rhyme and meter here so that the sentence can stand by itself. Another type of sentence we learned was the compound sentence. This is connecting two simple sentences together, two ICs, with a coordinating conjunction and a comma. So, using that original simple sentence, many poems use rhyme and meter. Well, now I want to connect this to another sentence rather than making them two separate sentences. So, I add my comma and a coordinating conjunction. The coordinating conjunction I chose was but. And then, after that, I have my second simple sentence or independent clause. Poetry is defined by several other characteristics. So, as a whole, instead of two separate sentences, I've now combined two independent clauses, and it looks like this. Many poems use rhyme and meter, comma, but. Poetry is defined by several other characteristics. Now we want to learn about complex sentences. So a complex sentence is not two independent clauses connected, but instead is an independent clause with a dependent clause. So a reminder, dependent clauses cannot stand alone because they depend on an independent clause to help it out. So if I was to connect an independent clause to a dependent clause, this is what it would look like. Here's the original independent clause. Many poems use rhyme and meter, although poetry is defined by several other characteristics. So as you can see, my dependent clause can be identified by this word although. In our next video, we will talk about subordinating conjunctions and how they begin dependent clauses. One other thing I want to point out, we are starting strong with an independent clause. So if you start strong, you don't need anything to help it along, which means I don't have any punctuation in between the two clauses. So it goes straight from one independent to the dependent, connected just by that subordinating conjunction. What happens if we switch it around? I start with a dependent clause, so if I start weak, I need something to help it attach to the independent clause, so I add a comma. This is how it looks like in a sentence. Although many poems use rhyme and meter, comma, poetry is defined by several other characteristics. So notice, our dependent clauses couldn't stand alone. Although many poems use rhyme and meter, yeah, what about it? So that is why I connect my independent clause. So complex sentences and compound sentences are great ways to connect two clauses together instead of just doing two separate sentences.